the key to a tumbling block is the value, is the color value, not necessarily the color. And so value is whether it's light, a medium, or a dark, and you do need a very clear separation between those, otherwise you won't get this really cool 3D optical illusion. As far as double checking your colors, it's good to take the time to do this. Lay it out so you have all of your lights together, and so those would be all of these fabrics. Pull out that darker one. There we go. So all of those fabrics are the lights, and then all of the mediums are going to be these. And so lay them all out flat and put them on your table and snap a picture of it. And you want to snap a picture of it with your phone or your camera using a particular setting. And that setting is mono or tonal. And what that's going to do is that's going to reduce all of the color, so that all you can see is the value and how dark some of these fabrics are and how light some of the fabrics are and how they relate to one another. And you stop seeing the color, which can be really distracting. And yes, I simplified this enormously because I used black as my dark. You could also, go to your stash and look for a dark version of each color if you wanted to, a very dark green, a very dark blue, a red would probably work well there. That's definitely open to you too. I encourage you to play with this and play with the settings on your camera or your phone to try and find those different color values, because that's really the key to making this really cool quilt. So let me show you and walk you through the process of cutting out some really small diamond shapes and triangle shapes, laying out your quilt, and piecing this really quickly. I sped up this process significantly by doing one thing. I split my light triangles, actually those are light diamonds, I split those in half to make 2 triangles, and that enabled me to strip piece this entire quilt. Made it really interesting to put together. It was still a little bit of a juggling act because, of course, I didn't want to misplace anything. I want to make sure it goes together just exactly right, but it really did come together very quick and easily. So let's first start by cutting out some of our diamond shapes, and I want to cut left-handed. So we're going to start with the strip, arrange like this, and I'm going to place the ruler down. And here's one thing. This is kind of a slippy ruler. It was moving around on my fabric quite a bit. I grabbed a pack of True Grips. These are little adhesive dots, and you can probably see them. I've got some donuts, I've got some circles here, and I put them in all 4 corners, plus in the middle. And I really laid it out on both sides because you're going to use both sides of this template. And you can find True Grips on my website, leahday.com/grip. So come and check them out. They really make a difference and stop the ruler from slipping. Okay, so I'm going to lay this out, and I like to line up that full long line right there, right along the edge of the fabric strip, so I'm sure it's nice and straight. And I'll cut that first angle, and then we'll rotate it around. And this is where you flip the ruler, or turn it around. There we go. That looks good. And then now I'm going to cut my diamond shapes. And you want to always make sure to include the line that you're cutting to. So I want to include that line. You don't want to cut it short. Don't slip it down that way. Include that little line, because that's a few threads, wide, that little line is, and that could affect your diamond shape. So there we go. 2 diamonds nicely stacked up on top of one another here. Okay, so there's our diamond shapes ready to go. Now let's cut some triangles. So again, I'm lining up that full long line with that strip so it looks nice and straight across. Cut off that edge, rotate it around, and then here in this case I need to flip the ruler. That's why I put the True Grips on both sides, so I can flip the ruler just like that, line it up, and make that cut. And now I've got a triangle shape, and just like before, I'm going to lop off those corners. So that way all of those corners are nicely lopped off and set up perfectly. And this is a nice time too. I found the triangles could sometimes kind of distort slightly when I cut it. So I kind of double check that angle while lopping off that corner. And I do the same thing again, just making sure I'm including the line as I make my cut. There we go. Yep, that trimmed it up. It's just a little bit of fuzz there, but I can tell whenever the fabric's sliding around on me a little bit, and that will make a big difference in the accuracy. Now I realize one more shape you might have to make is a half triangle shape, and I still have my nice angle from cutting those diamonds. And you line up this side of the ruler with that angle, just like that, and that's going to cut a half triangle. And that's what you use whenever you're piecing the edges, those bottom edges of the quilt. You use those half triangles, and that fits in and gives you a nice straight edge. So that's super cool. And you can also lop off that little tip too. And just line it up. You don't want to take it all the way down here. Just line it up just like that and give it a little nick. And be careful when you're cutting across like that. Just go straight down with your rotary cutter and right back up again. There we go. So that's the different shapes that we can cut. Now let's lay out. This is really fun, and it's always kind of a little challenge for me. It's like spatial orientation, just making sure that the pattern is working. So I always started with the darks, and I think I got that many left over. And so then I grab the mediums and lay it out just like this. And this starts to build the pattern of the tumbling block, because these are really, they're kind of like the baseline is your darks and your mediums, because they kind of form that nice pattern right across the block. And it's really dependable. You can kind of check yourself, knowing that you're going to have black diamonds going that way and medium blue diamonds going that way. It's really useful. There we go. Oops, I think that one, yeah, there we go. And that's another thing. Once you put a shape in and it's angling one way, it's only ever going to go that way. It's never going to be angling in the opposite direction. That's another way you can check yourself. There we go. Looks like I might need one black shape if I want that to go there. I might just slip it out and just go with 4 rows. That looks pretty good. Now, if we were doing this in a traditional way, then we would do light blue diamonds here for the tops. And you can already start to see that 3D quality coming in, where we get that optical illusion that it's tumbling blocks, that they're 3-dimensional. But here's the thing. If you piece this with all diamonds, then that's going to create some Y seams. Basically, you're going to have to piece those together to make a hexagon, and then piece those hexagons together. I've done that before. It's really, really time consuming. And I personally didn't find it a lot of fun. So when I was designing this, I was like, well, what would happen if we replace those light ones with triangle shape? And what this allows you to do is it allows you to strip piece. Now, I'm being a little picky. I want to make sure that those triangles are straight of grain going this way, because I found playing with this enough with that quilt that I made that when I rotated it and had that angled, sometimes it would just make it a little fiddly to put everything together. So that's our little test sample block. Now I'm going to grab some Wonder Clips. These really make it a lot easier to put together. And what we're going to do, we're going to work in rows. And so basically I know I've got diamond shapes going to triangle shapes, and I know that each diamond gets a light blue triangle. So at least for this row, everything is the same. Everything is pieced to the same color. So I could just take that and flip it down all the way down that row. And it's really good to have some sort of pattern in mind, so that way you know what to expect, you know what you're doing when you get to your machine, and you do need to have some way of marking and letting yourself know that the seam that you're going to stitch is that seam, because once you put these triangles on top, obviously you could stitch that seam too, right? And then your piece would be angling the wrong way. So how I work this out is I place a Wonder Clip on the seam on the side I'm going to stitch. I've got my needle set so it's going to end in the down position, and my stitch length set to 1.5 millimeters. That's going to produce a really nice, tight, consistent stitch. And I just slip those pieces underneath the foot, make sure that they stay in nice alignment as I stitch all the way down. And you're going to alternate. You can see how the angle of one will be different from the angle of the next if you're piecing these in order. And I do think it's a good idea to piece these in order. And I'll show you why coming up really soon. It's going to make a big difference, because we're actually going to leave this chain together. And that's how I was able to piece my mini quilt my sunrise quilt because I kept the chain together, and that enabled me to keep the rows in the right order so I could always return it to the layout really easily. So I moved over to my pressing board and I'm just gently finger pressing these seam allowances open. Now the triangles they should be on the bias for this seam, so just be gentle. And it really helps to do the finger pressing first and then press it with a hot dry iron, because if you try and dig that open with the tip of your iron, it's just not going to get as flat. It's really going to distort that seam too. All right, so here is where you can see why I keep the pieces in a chain, because it keeps it in the right order. So it doesn't have any choice. If I have it like this, then I know it's upside down, right? So I know this is the way it goes. And trust me, when you've got multiple colors in your quilt, this is definitely going to make a big deal. You know, it's definitely going to make a big difference in how your layout goes and how quickly your quilt goes together. So we're going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to take the piece and flip it over. So there are the rows of our little mini tumbling block quilt put together, and now we just need to sew these rows together. So I just flip over one row just like that and clip it again, making sure that I know what line I'm going to stitch, what side of those pieces I'm going to stitch. So here at the machine, I'm going to take my time, making sure that I bring the edges and corners of those diamond shapes in nice alignment. They should be stacked up right on top of one another. And I'm just going to slide them underneath the foot and really just get my needle in it and stop, so that way I can line up these pieces further down. So I'm just stacking up those seam allowances right on top of one another. I'm not going to pin it. I'm just going to press firmly with my fingertip and let the machine do the job. So just open that up gently. Make sure that you're going to get the pattern, and that looks good. So I'm going to flip over one on top of the other and line up those edges. It really helps to start out on the right foot, and you got to start with those points lining up, those edges lining up just right. There we go. That looks good. I just stack those seams. And I really do use the tips of my fingers quite a lot. I use a lot of fingertip pressure. But, you know, I've heard of quilters using stilettos, you know, and if, you know, your fingertips hurt at all, you know, you might want to put a thimble or something kind of grippy on your finger. That could work too. You just got to make it work for you. There we go. Now stitch all the way off. There we go. So of course the next step is to finger press those seam allowances open. I like to dig in there and just really get that seam flat with my fingers first. And this is just going to really make it a lot easier to quilt over. It's going to make it a lot flatter, and hope, you know, it might actually make some of those joins, some of those points where the seams come together, it might make them look a little bit better too. Here we go. Now I'm just going to press, and this is just a hot, dry iron. Just like that. There we go. And there's our little block. So that is how it works to create a tumbling block quilt with triangles for the lightest diamond. So you can piece it in rows, then piece those rows together, being careful to match all of those seams. You just stack them on top of one another, and it just really, honestly, it works out 90% of the time. I found I didn't really need to pin that much. Just watch the angle of your fabric and try and get the straight of grain running straight and parallel with those rows. And I do think that that makes it a lot easier to go together. And of course, here's the big one. If you would like to make this version of the quilt, you can find the exact cutting instructions plus the diagram for putting it together. You can find that at leahday.com/tumble. So come and check this out and make this beautiful tumbling block sunrise with me. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned a lot and you're excited about tackling this tumbling block sunrise. I love how this came out. I'm probably going to turn this into a little mini hoop quilt and put it in a hoop rather than having to bind it or anything like that. So I'll quilt it up and have it ready to display on my wall. It definitely is something that I've been wanting to do for years, learn how to make this tumbling blocks effect. And I think piecing it with triangles on those lightest pieces really makes it easier, it makes it faster, it makes it something that you can really knock out quickly. So definitely check out the free quilt pattern and make one of these minis too at leahday.com/tumble.